Hello, I'm Joshua Carr. Today what I'd like to do is to walk you through how to do a modeling case. I've taught for years at Columbia University and other universities, and probably the most common question I get from students is, hey, I'm looking to apply for a job in real estate private equity or something like that, and I'm going to have to take this modeling test. Do you have any modeling tests? Can you explain to me what a modeling test looks like? Can you explain to me how to solve a modeling test? And so I thought the best way to really go through this was basically to show you a modeling case and to walk you through step by step how you could build it. So what you should see on the screen right now is basically a PDF of a modeling case. Obviously, names have been removed. This is a case from a few years ago. I'm also going to post this on my website. I'll have a link for that in the YouTube comments. It's pretty typical. This is basically an office deal. It's got a couple tenants. We're going to buy it. We're going to sell it. There's going to be some financing thrown in. You can see here we've got a couple tenants. We're buying it. We are selling it. There's an investment structure. That's probably the thing I get the most questions about, where there's a preferred return and a some sort of promote type structure. Not the most complex one, but these things seem to drive people a little batty. And then deliverables in this case would be to say, okay, let's put together a sources and uses schedule. Let's do an unleveraged cash flow. Let's show IRRs, and then build a couple data tables. In this case, a data table showing varying leverage and cap rates, and then a second data table showing what if you sell it in different years, again with different cap rates. That's basically what it is. Now, a few comments to make before I get started on this. First off, you know, I haven't built this one in a while. I've done it before, so you know, if I make a mistake, I'll go back and fix it. You know, it's pretty much just flow of consciousness here. Second thing is to say, before you even get started on this, you got to identify what issues might come up. So the first thing to point out before I even get cracking on this is you'll notice that it says, well, we're going to sell it at the end of year 6. And like in this case, oh, there's a step up in year 4 of this lease, in year 5 of this lease, blah, blah, blah. So a lot of people at first glance would be like, well, then it's an annual model. Because again, you see a lot of year 3 and year 5. There's a lot of commentary making it look like it's whole years. We're not going to do it that way, because there are at least a couple places, this being one of them, where, for example, we're going to have a free rent period, a rental abatement for 6 months from lease commencement date. So as soon as you start to say, hey, there's adjustments that are in months, not in years, you got to build a monthly cash flow and you got to roll it up. So we're going to be forced to do a monthly cash flow. That's probably the first thing to point out before I get cracking on it. The second thing is that while it says we're selling at the end of year 6, we're going to actually have to figure out not just selling it at the end of year 6, but also, going down a little, we see here in the data table section that we're going to have to do different cap rates at different time periods. So for example, in this case, from years 4 through year 7. So if we have different periods of years, different number of years, then you know you're going to have to sell it at different times, and which means we're going to have to make the sale calculations variable. Okay, so let's get cracking on this thing. What I'm going to do, because I think it'll make my life easier, is I'm going to have the PDF up here, and I'm going to just shrink that a smidgen, and we'll sort of do, you know, screen 1 on one side and sort of do page 1 and page 2 and sort of see how it goes. Okay, so to start with, it's a 139,000 foot office building. We have 2 partners. We have this entity, New York City Properties, and we have the blacked out name. I'll just call them Black Capital because I blacked out the name, so let's just call it Black Capital. And this is an actual PDF from an actual PE shop from a few years ago. I blacked out the name, so hopefully they won't take that too personally. And the first thing to point out is, again, we've got these 2 tenants. So tenant 1 is 53,000 feet, tenant 2 is 83,000 feet. You'll notice up here, though, it says that the building is 139,000 feet. Now, I may not be a math PhD, but last time I checked, 53 plus 83 is not equal to 139. Now, this could be a screw up, and simply someone at Black Capital forgot that 53 plus 83 is not 139, or it could be a trick. In my experience, it's probably just a screw up. These things get slapped together, passed around the office. I do not believe this was an attempt to trick someone. So we're just going to pretend for a moment. We got to make a judgment call at this point, right? So we got to either say it's a 139,000 foot building or 136,000 foot building. I'm going to play along with them, and I'm going to just say, you know, that the gross square footage is 139,000 feet. And the reason that's going to matter is because later on, as you can see here, we're going to have to do capital reserves, which are 30 cents a foot. That will be tied to the size of the asset, so we kind of got to know what we know. Awesome. Then we're going to have tenant 1 and tenant 2. And you know, this may not be the best way to format it, but we can play around with layout later. And I'll call this the assumptions page. I try to get all my assumptions on one sheet because that's just easier way of working. So now this tenant is 53,000 feet. 53,000 feet. And it says here that the lease term is 10 years and that there's a step up in year 4. Now, since we are modeling anywhere from, as it says down here, selling anywhere from years 4 to 7, the fact that both tenants are 10 years and 10 years means we don't have to deal with any rollover assumptions. A lot of times when people build models like this, they'll say, well, actually the tenant blows out in year 3. What if we refi it? What if the tenant rolls over? What happens? What happens? What happens? In this case, they haven't bothered to model any of those things, which would require weighted average calculations. I have another set of videos that deals with those issues, where I just build like a financial model from the ground up. I understand why they left it out. It's really annoying and complex to build that sort of stuff. I think here they were just trying to figure out, can you buy it, can you sell it, can you finance it, can you value it? They weren't getting into what about rollover calcs. I don't know, maybe they figured the guy didn't have enough time to crack it, but that's what they did. Okay, fine. So in this case, moving back over here for a moment, the lease starts 9/30/2012, 9/30/2012, and we're going to have really 2 periods. We're going to have, it's going to be 10 bucks a foot, sorry, it's going to be $75 a foot from 9/30/2012 to the start of year 4. So there are a bunch of ways to do that. If you're going from, if year 1 starts at 9/30/2012, then year 4 would start 9/30/2016. There are again a bunch of ways to do this. My preference is not to use dates, it's to use months, because I think months are an easier way of looking at things. So let's go back here for a moment. The analysis starts September 30, 2014, right? So the analysis start date is 9/30/2014. That's basically month 0. You know what? Since we are using dates, I'll do this way. I'll do start and end and dollar per square foot. So in this case, if we want to go forward to year 4, I'm just going to do EO month, that, comma, 36. I'm going to format that to dates. Actually, oopsie, I need to go forward. Well, no, that's right, actually. Start of year 4 would be, right, because 12, 13, 13, 14, 14, 15. So 9/30/2015 would be the start of year 4. Awesome. And then, if I do that, you know, again, EO month, that, comma, 1. Here, let me just format all this stuff here. Some dates. That'll be the next month. And then that will go to basically the end, which if it's running for 10 years would be that, comma 120, which would be 9/30/2022. Okay, cool. So again, that's that's working as expected. If you wanted to double check that that was working correctly, you could just take this number minus this number, and in this case you get 3,652, which just eyeballing it makes sense because each year has 365 days. That's 10 years and I guess a couple leap days in the middle. Okay, fine. Easy enough just to double check my math is correct. Take that plus 10 bucks. So it's 75 and then 85. Okay, awesome. Now let's do that again for tenant number 2. Tenant number 2, on the other hand, will be 83,000 feet. And it's going to be in start of year 5, which would be 9/30/16, and it's going to start at 85. Sorry, it's going to start at 85. It's going to go up by 10 bucks to 95, assumedly. And in this case, it's going to start at 9/30/2014. And that looks like it's working correctly. Cool. Again, if you wanted to double check that you're doing it correctly, you could just take this number minus that number, and you find that it's 1461. And if I took that divided by 365, there it is. It's 4 years. So start of year 5. In addition to that, there's going to be a TI, a tenant improvement of 35 bucks a foot. There's going to be a free rent period of 6 months. That's months from lease commencement date, and leasing commissions is going to be 0. I guess they just didn't feel like putting that in. And when it says TIs all paid in year 1, we're going to have to make a judgment call. I'm going to assume all happens on month 1. They were unclear here, and it's not uncommon that when you get these modeling cases that they just don't put in enough detail. Okay, so in addition to that, there's some OpEx information about 40% of gross base rental revenues. There's going to be some reimbursement revenue. There's going to be some CapEx. Okay, fine. That's okay. Let's start building this thing and at least put in the rents, and then once we get the rental stream, we can put in the OpEx. Once the OpEx is in there, we can bake in some reimbursement revenue. We can then put in TIs, leasing commissions. We can work our way down the stack. And you'll note, by the way, there's no vacancy calculation here. They just magically pretended that vacancy isn't a thing. So that's going to make this easier than it would be otherwise. Okay, so I got my second sheet, and I'll call this cash flow. And also, because we're going to need it, I'm going to also have a page called purchase and sale. And then I guess I'll have another sheet called executive summary, which usually I make the first page. I tend to really only care about the first, making that one the pretty one, Everything else I really don't care what it looks like. Okay. So cash flow. So if I'm doing cash flow, I've got potential, rental revenue, and people call this different things. Potential rental revenue. Usually you've got sort of like potential rental revenue or gross potential rental revenue, and then you get to effective rental because you need to, or effective gross revenue because you need to back it out. Here, I'll just call this rental revenue. And again, different people call things different things. Okay, fine. So we got tenant 1 and tenant 2. And I'll just right justify that so it's a little cleaner looking, or better yet, leave it left justified and just step it in a little bit. Okay, fine. So then we've got dates. And in this case, the analysis starts, as you can see here, on September 30, 2014. So I'm going to do 2 things. The first thing is I'm going to put in 9/30/2014 2014, but that's really month 0, right? I mean, what really matters is that's when it starts, but if the lease commenced 9/30/2014, then the cash really happens in October, right? Because that's basically the way this stuff works. So, in other words, and again, I'll format that, 10/31/2014. So if this is that +1, and that's that to there, I can drag all that stuff across. Now, in this case, it says that you want to assume that you're selling at the end of year 6, but you also want to have the flexibility to potentially sell it exit in year 7. So if I'm going to sell it potentially at the end of year 7, and you usually need cash flow in year 8 to get the sale at the end of year 7, I need to extend this at least 8 times 12. In other words, I need to have this go at least 96 months. So I'm going to take this, and I'm just going to drag that little baby across, and I dragged it way too far. And I'm going to go back. And there it is. And then just because my formatting is nightmarishly bad, oops, sorry, I'll just get a little bit more space, and there we go. So now I'm doing it from September 30, 2014, which is month 0, the start of the beginning of the analysis, going to the date 9/30/2022, which is month 96. And you know, I put these months here because sometimes I like to look at it from a date point of view. Sometimes I want to be able to use month numbers when I'm summing up like a 12-month window of time. It's just good to have both of them there. In any event, this is the beginning of the series of videos I'm going to do for my modeling case. Also, just to finish the thought before I end this video and go to the next one, if this sort of stuff interests you, you can always check out my website at carrealestate.com. Carrealestate.com has a series of videos and links on other related things. I also do an Excel modeling class every 5 to 6 weeks in New York City. So if this is the sort of stuff you're into, feel free to check out my website, check out my Excel modeling class, and you know, suggestions for additional videos are always appreciated. Excellent. So hopefully you'll tune into the next video and keep on building better models. Excellent.